And we're going to be talking now to Joyce Lovely. The reason I'm playing that was that Joyce grew up in Liverpool, and we're talking about her book, Icecreams, Gasmasks and God. So you're in America, aren't you, at the moment?
Yes, I am. Yes, state of Maine.
So it's morning time there?
Yes, it's about 11:30 almost. Yeah.
Now, I've never been well, actually, we stopped off flying to Los Angeles. We stopped off at Bangor, Maine, and literally for about 2 hours. But we never got out of the airport, so I can never say I've really been there, but I have. Lovely to have you on, Joyce, and the book looks absolutely fantastic. Just tell us a little bit about why write the book, and why now?
Well, I'm getting older, not younger, like most other people, and several people said to me if I shared memories about during World War II, the bombing and everything, and how we lived as children, they said, you should really write these down. And I said, maybe one day. I have written some little things down and had them published, but they've been just incidents, from my early life. And then I became part of a writing group, and they kind of encouraged me as well. And so I took the plunge, and I sat down at the computer, closed my eyes, and put myself right back. So that's how I did it, and that's why I did it. And hopefully other people can enjoy it too.
It must have been strange. The way your life is now must be very different to where it was then. And to kind of put yourself back in that again must have been quite strange for you.
It was. It really was. I was kind of surprised myself because as I did it, it was almost like a replay of a video. And I found myself back there in the back garden with my little horse and watching my dad and the neighbour next door digging the air raid shelter. It was really a strange feeling. And details were there in front of me. It was like a photographic replay. And I could see, like, in my mother's washing up bowl and the ridges at the bottom and the chipped green rim to it. So it was really, I surprised myself at what I could remember. But it was not a hypnosis, but it was, one is amazed at how much is buried there within our subconscious.
Now, I was watching, and it's funny that I'm talking to you because 2 nights ago I was watching on YouTube, and it was a documentary about the British invasion of the Beatles and so on in the 1960s going to America. And because they were so famous in America, and people like Jerry and the Pacemakers and all these other people, and some of the other bands that were there, like Herman's Hermits, were saying, so whereabouts in Liverpool are you from then? Because the Americans had this view that everybody was from Liverpool coming to America, and they also had this view from what the documentary was saying was that they all wanted to go to Liverpool, and the Beatles and that were saying, well, actually, it's not much to look at. So we kind of have this picture of Liverpool being very industrial and so on. What was it like as a city in the 40s?
Oh, it was grim, but I didn't know anything different. It's the way it was. All the buildings I thought were made of black stone. And in fact, I went back in the 80s, and I thought, my gosh, they've rebuilt the St. George's Hall because it was white. And of course, I didn't realise
they cleaned it.
On me that they cleaned it. It was all sandblasted. But that's the way it was, and I didn't really think too much about it. It's only in retrospect you realise that it was a pretty grim place. But I loved to go downtown, and it was what I knew. It was what I was familiar with. I loved the pier head to go down there, and of course my mother told me not to go too close to the edge, otherwise I'd fall in the Mersey. But that was a thrill for me as a child to do that and go across on the ferry boat. And the fact that it was black and industrial. It's all I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything else. Yeah.
From my generation, I was born in the 70s, so I don't know the war generation at all, but we hear about it. And what was it, that kind of community spirit that we kind of, from my generation, look back on with kind of a little bit of envy?
I think because everything was so scarce, rations, we were living under the threat of death, really, daily, and especially in the big cities. Although as children we weren't aware of that. But I think that type of, in adversity, people pull together. And that is exactly what happened. People would help each other out. I can remember one incident. We had an old clothes lady who used to come around. We used to call her that. She had a big bundle on her back, probably an old pillowcase, filled with old clothes. Meg, we used to call her, old Meg. And my mother would always have her in and have a cup of tea by the fire. And one day she came in and her shoes were soaking wet, absolutely soaking. And she took them off to dry them by the fire, the coal fire, and she had newspaper in them. And I was amazed because at least we always had our shoes repaired. And my mum took the shoes off her own feet and gave them to her.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing it brought out back then. I mean, all the kids knew each other. We played in the street. Of course, there were no cars. Everybody knew everybody else. But, the funny thing is, too, Dave, everybody called everyone else by their last name, unless they were really close to them. It was always Mrs. Bibby, Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Ferber, Mrs. Lunt. We never knew their first names.
Yeah.
So there was that little reserve still, and yet anybody would have done anything for anyone.
I kind of miss that. I hear about it from my family and so on, and what it was like growing up in Derby where they were, and I miss that. Everybody says to me you were born in the wrong era because I like older music as well, but I kind of miss all that. There was some. We're talking about obviously that kind of warm side of it there, but there's no getting away from it. It was desperate times, wasn't it, as well? It was a war.
They were, yeah, they were. But our priorities as children were somewhat different to the adults. The one time it really came home to me that people were dying in this conflict is we went down to the pier head and there was a big troop ship in. And they were all waving and whistling. We were standing on the edge there where the railings, the chains were where the Mersey was. And I remember my mum turning to my dad, who was in the National Fire Service, and she said something about those poor lads. I wonder how many will come back.
Yeah.
And my father said something about those poor sods. And I kind of remember thinking, oh, my goodness, this means these actual live people who I can see may not come back. And I was all small at the time. But we worried at the air raid sirens. Even today, if I hear an air raid siren, we're watching the documentary, This Old House, being in the 40s, actually, right now. And I hear those air raid sirens and my stomach still turns over. So there was a sense of fear there. But as children, we lived in the present moment. And once that air raid was over, once we woke up the next morning, we'd rush into the street, we'd fight over shrapnel as to who could get the biggest piece. We'd go and play on the bombed site. And that sense of death being all around didn't affect us the way it did the parents and the adults.
On one occasion, the family narrowly missing, or surviving, should I say, the Blitz. We're talking about 2,000 fellow Liverpudlians died in that. And I lived in Coventry for 7 years and heard stories about 90,000 German bombs being dropped on Coventry in one evening. I don't think our generation can relate to it fully. Yes,
I remember that night because I had whooping cough. And so we couldn't go to the air raid shelter. I was recovering from it at that point. And I remember all the windows blowing in. And I remember thinking, all those crisscross patterns we had on our windows with sticky paper, it didn't do a darn thing. They all came in. And my mum drew the curtains, of course, and she had cushions up against the curtains to stop the cold coming in. And 8 people just round the corner died from us. They got a direct hit. And they were in their shelters, but they still died. And that kind of brought it home to us. But my mum was most upset because all her willow pattern china, it all got smashed. So funny, the little things that get to people in a major tragedy.
It's strange, isn't it, how your mind reacts to tragedy like that. But it wasn't. Obviously you were waiting, thinking about maybe the end of the war and so on. But apparently, I'm reading here you also dreamed about chocolate and ice cream, and I dream about that myself even now. So that's nothing new.
Yes. Well, ice cream was a vague memory, before the war. And, of course, we couldn't get chocolate or ice cream during the war. And I think the best ice cream I ever had was the first ice cream I had after the war. And we were given one in school to celebrate VE Day. And we weren't even sure what it was, but oh boy, did we like it. And no ice cream has ever tasted the same since. and of course, gas masks, we all had to carry our gas masks wherever we went. And I hated it. I absolutely hated mine. But I will tell you something very interesting. And I wanted a Donald Duck one. I wanted absolutely above anything else a Donald Duck gas mask. But last September, I was over visiting my sister in Liverpool. And she said she had something for me. And apparently they'd been insulating the cockloft. And my mum had lived in the house before. My sister Jean and Brian had bought it. And she brought down, when I went over to visit, she brought down this little square cardboard box. And I opened the string. And there inside was my childhood gas mask. I mean, I laughed, I cried. I mean, it was just an incredible experience. The rubber had all perished and was in crumbles around the box, the bottom of the box. But the eyepiece was still there, the respirator, the snout, and even the tapes at the back where my mum had pinned them to accommodate my head size, they were still in place. And so that was really... it was a very moving moment, and so I quickly changed my book to incorporate that little piece at the beginning.
Great stuff.
And, yeah, it was very meaningful.
I've got to ask you as well, in those years, about, well, come on, let's spill the beans, Joyce, handsome boyfriends. Were there many around?
Oh, yeah, there were a few around, yeah. Some were in the service, of course, but, they were 18, 20, they hadn't been old enough to fight in the war, but they were old enough to be around for us, so to speak. I used to love to go dancing. I used to love to learn to ballroom dance, and that was the highlight of the week. So
what sort of music were you dancing to in those particular years, Joyce? What was it?
Okay, the 50s, Saints Come Marching In, that was a big one. Four-leaf clover.
So this is pre-rock and roll, isn't it?
It was the beginning of rock and roll. Cliff Richard, Living Doll, I remember that, Nat King Cole, Moon River, and some of the old wartime ones, Vera Lynn ones, we danced to those, Tennessee Waltz.
Tennessee Waltz, love that one.
Yeah, and you still hear them sometimes.
I was dancing with my darling.
Oh yeah, we always finished with that.
One of my dad's favourite. My dad used to tell me he used to go to Locarno, and him and his mate, and they'd have all the big band music, but it's just as rock and roll was kind of taking over. But they still want to play the big band music, and his mate would keep getting up saying, "Play some rock and roll, play some rock and roll." Great times. And so there were a few suitors on the scene for you then, a few boys.
I'm sorry?
There were a few boys on the scene for you then.
Oh, yes. But my mother used to tell me I was too picky.
Now, as the title goes, you talk about God as well. We've talked about ice cream and gas masks, and then God comes into your life at some point. How did that come about, and really that really had an effect on your future husband, of course?
Yes. Well, I guess it began, first of all, my mother and father never went to church. They never went near a church. Occasionally my dad might go Harvest Festival, and he did take me to one once. But my mother did teach me to pray, as long as I can remember. And it was, God bless Mummy, God bless Daddy, God bless Nana and Papa, all those who we love, and please help Joyce be a good girl tomorrow. Amen. So that piece was there. And then I got sent to Sunday school, so my mum and dad could read the Sunday papers in peace. Sunday Express, News of the World, And in Sunday school, I realized pretty quickly that this person called God, who resided on a big white cloud with a long white beard, of course, you could ask him anything. You could ask him for all kinds of things. And so I would petition after my mum had gone out of the bedroom. I'd ask for a nice sunny day if we were going to have a picnic in the park. And, of course, I asked as well for a Donald Duck gas mask. And whatever, and I wanted a book. I desperately wanted a book of my own because the others were all hand-me-downs from other people. So I take that to God as well. And so that was the beginning. And it's interesting, Dave, because my sister was sent to Sunday school too, and by the time she was 10 years of age, she said, I've had enough. I don't want any more of this. And she never went again. But there was something there that caught me within.
Yeah.
And I became a Sunday school teacher at 13 years of age with little kids. And at 14, I went up to the Lake District for a Sunday school teachers' conference. And at the end of the day, we finished with Compline, and I had an experience there, which I had no idea what it was. It was just an incredible feeling of peace and goodwill and just being kind of almost lifted off my feet. And it lasted about 2 or 3 days, and then it died down. But I realized it was a sense of God's presence. And that was the major turning point, I think. And I mean, the euphoria kind of died down, but the embers stayed.
Yeah.
And so as a teenager, my understanding of God changed a little bit. But basically, God was someone I went to with problems, with situations, show me the right way. I was engaged to be married. Should I stay? Should I marry this person? Should I break my engagement? And so it went through. And, then we came to America, and of course, as the years have passed, my understanding of God has changed dramatically until I'm very interested in quantum physics as well. And I find the two just absolutely are one. They go together because God is in and through all that is. And although I've gone to church all my life, I would call myself more of a contemplative than a religious person.
I would be the same. Yeah, I mean, I'm a pastor, so everybody expects me to be religious. But actually, and if I do a wedding, and I did an Irish wedding, everybody's calling me, that was a lovely service there, Father, and all that. But actually, it's all about relationship, isn't it, with God, rather than religion. And that's what I'm always trying to plumb home to everybody. It's not about religion. It's not about having to do this, that, and it's about having a relationship with God.
Yeah. That's the basic thing. It's a state of being at one in God as much as we can. And yes, it's that compassion, the love, and that's the driving force or the energy, which, I believe keeps us going.
Well, Joyce, I'm going to have to interview you on my Christian show I do on a Sunday morning called The Two Revs. So maybe I'll get you back on and we'll talk a bit more about your faith on that show. Look forward to that.
Okay. That would be fantastic. I'd love to. Yeah.
And just finally, because time is against us, Joyce, I'm reading here, and this would be a killer for me. I love my old music and Elvis and people like that, and the Beatles, of course. But you missed out on seeing the Beatles perform at the Cavern Club. Tell us more.
I know. Isn't that awful? And it was all because of my superior attitude towards my little sister.
Now, you see, you must be the only one, because everybody I met from that generation who were from Liverpool all saw the Beatles at the Cavern.
Yeah. Well, Jean used to go regularly, and she used to tell me, Joyce, you should really come. They're a smashing group. They're fantastic. You should come. And say, what my little sister likes is not what I always like. And of course, I regretted it. And my brother-in-law was at school with John Lennon. They were in the same class in Quarry Bank. Yeah.
So
just over the wall from Calder High, where I went to, but I never saw him. Yeah.
Never mind. But whatever. Even missing out on the Beatles, you've lived quite an exciting life, and there you are now. You've lived all over the UK in many places. I'm reading here, and now you are. What brought you to America, to Maine, in USA?
Well, my former husband, as I mentioned, he was a minister, and he liked the system over here better than the circuit system in England. He was a Methodist, and he met somebody who had done an exchange with a minister over here, and he really raved about being in America and how much he liked it, and if he'd been younger, he would emigrate there. And so my husband, at that time, he said, I'd go to America tomorrow, but Joyce would never go. Anyway, long story, the short story is that I came, and we came here. But he liked the system and the idea of just being in one parish, and so that was the big attraction. And
is it home for you now, Joyce?
How is it for me now?
Is it home for you now? I mean, would you ever go back to the UK?
We do. We do home exchanges, and so we don't wear our welcome out with my sister, but we get to visit a lot, which is nice. But I feel divided. It's strange. I still feel my roots are in England. I love to go back. I feel at home there. And yet my family is here in America. So, and this country has been very good to me.
Yeah.
It has in many ways. And you never find the perfect place.
Of course not.
I enjoy both. Yes.
Well, you must come and see us in Spain sometime as well.
Oh, now then, I've got a friend who lives in Spain. He retired there. So, yeah, that's on our list.
Good stuff. Thank you, Joyce. There's lots we could have talked about, but you can get the book, and I'm sure you'll find this interesting. Get it on Amazon here in Spain. It's called Icecreams, Gasmasks and God. And Joyce will try and get you back on the two revs as well. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much.
Okay, then. Yeah,
Bless you.
I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Bye.
Bye.